Switzerland, ranked 15th in the world by FIFA, will be making their 12th appearance in the finals of the World Cup in Qatar. Their first appearance in 1934 was a tournament with no group stage, and they were able to beat the Dutch, but suffered a defeat to the Czechs in the quarterfinals. In France 1938, before penalty kick shootouts, there were replays. A 1-1 draw with Germany forced a replay in which they won 4-2 before being defeated by Hungary, once again in the quarterfinals. A horrific loss to Yugoslavia in Brazil 1950 was more than enough damage done. Despite drawing hosts with a late equalizer in the second game and beating Mexico in the third match, the Swiss would not see the quarterfinals for a third successive tournament. They would be hosts in 1954, providing plenty of dramatic action. An opening win over Italy, followed by a defeat to the English, would force a playoff against the Italians. The Swiss seemed to fare just fine in these situations, as they once again scored 4 goals to advance to the quarterfinals. They would face Austria in what is still the highest scoring World Cup match ever played. While there have been some unbelievable games in the tournament, this one is the wonkiest. Firstly, it was 104 degrees for most of the match, causing the Austrian keeper to suffer horribly in the beginning of the game. This may have contributed to the 3 goals the Swiss would score from the 16th to the 19th minute. Then it was the Austrians' turn, scoring 5 goals from the 25th minute to the 34th minute. Looks like the defense decided it was way too hot to show up for this one. The Swiss pulled one back 5 minutes later before the Austrians missed a penalty, leaving the score at 5-4 at the break. A comparatively calm half followed, where only 3 more goals were scored, and the Swiss were unable to triumph in an absolutely insane game in front of their home fans. Nothing if not exciting. That craziness was the beginning of the worst period in Swiss World Cup history. The loss was the first of 7 straight in the World Cup, being drawn into tough groups in both 1962 and 1966, managing only 3 goals across the 6 games in the tournament, in both tournaments combined, beginning a 28-year exile from the World Cup. The American edition of the tournament was a bit happier for the Swiss. Once again drawn into the hosts group, they opened the tournament versus the Americans with a 1-1 draw, and followed this up with a wonderful result over the Romanians 4-1. Despite a loss to the Colombians in the third match, they advanced to the quarterfinals for the 4th time in their history. And for the 4th time in their history, a disappointing 3-0 loss against the Spanish would see them bow out, but still proud of their return to the world stage. After another hiatus that lasted 12 years, the Swiss were back in Germany, 2006. An impressive draw against France, and then 2 wins against Togo and South Korea won them the group without conceding a single goal. They then faced Ukraine, led by the mighty Andrei Shevchenko, and the match played 0-0 into penalties. The Swiss would set 2 records they would not want to remember in this shootout. The first being that they were the first and only team to go out on penalties without netting a single one of their own shots. And also, they would be the only team to go out of the tournament without conceding a single goal. South Africa was an interesting tournament for the Swiss team, drawn against eventual champions Spain, Chile, and Honduras. They started with a shock victory over the Spanish Dream Team. Then a tough 1-0 loss to Chile followed, leaving them needing a result against the Hondurans in the final game. A drab 0-0 would not be enough despite being the only team to beat champion Spain in this tournament. A topsy-turvy campaign down in Brazil in 2014 was certainly filled with excitement and drama. A 93rd minute winner over Ecuador in the opening match was followed by a dismal defeat at the hands of the French. A little revenge to bounce back against the Honduras side, who held them in the last tournament 3-0, saw them through to face Argentina. It looked like penalties once again, but Angel Di Maria crushed the Swiss dream in the 118th minute to see the Argentines through on their way to the final. Drawn into a tough group in Russia, they earned a hard-fought draw against Brazil 1-1 in the opener, and followed that up with a good win over Serbia in the second game 2-1. The 2-all draw with Costa Rica in the third match was enough to see them through into the round of 16, where Sweden awaited in St. Petersburg. Despite saving a late penalty, the Swiss were cast out 1-0 by a Forsberg goal in the 66th minute. The Swiss have a long history in the tournament of making it out of the group stage, yet have won only once in a knockout game at the World Cup, that in 1934 when there was no group stage. The likes of Xherdan Shaqiri and Granit Xhaka will look to improve on this record and look to channel some of the craziness of their memories hosting the tournament in 1954 for a dramatic and exciting run at this year's edition. Stefan Lichtsteiner and Valon Behrami will no doubt be excited to see the Swiss back in action in the World Cup, as well as both have represented the nation 10 times in the World Cup, with Behrami being the only Swiss player to feature in 4 tournaments. An interesting group not dissimilar to last time out, with Brazil, Serbia, and Cameroon on the docket, looks to be a spicy one that the Swiss will be hoping they can bring their own flair and influence to in just a few days' time.